The Mummy's Curse is the 1944 horror film follow-up to The Mummy's Ghost. This film marks Lon Chaney, Jr.'s final appearance as Kharis, the Egyptian mummy. The Universal Mummy series boasts of a parallel Earth kind of timeline. The Mummy's Hand was made and set in 1940. The Mummy's Tomb takes place 30 years later in 1970. The Mummy's Ghost is also set in 1970. And The Mummy's Curse 25 years after Ghost. That means if the timeline is taken seriously, this film is set in 1995. Although the previous two films in the series take place in Massachusetts, with no explanation being given for the change. The Mummy's Curse moves the action to Louisiana. Plot: the Southern Engineering Company is trying to drain the swamp of Cajun country for the public good. However, the efforts are being hampered by the superstitions of the workers, who believe the area to be haunted by the mummy and his bride. Two representatives of the Scripps Museum, Dr. James Halsey and Dr. Ilzor Zandab, arrive on the scene and present their credentials to the head of the project, Pat Walsh. They have come to search for the missing mummies buried in the swamp years earlier. Their conversation is interrupted by the news that a workman has been murdered in the swamps. Evidence at the scene convinces Halsey that the murderer has found the mummy of Kharis. Later that evening, Zandab sneaks into the swamp and meets Ragab. Ragab is a disciple of the Arkham sect, and Zandab is secretly a high priest. The follower killed the worker that unearthed Kharis, and has taken the immobile monster to a deserted monastery. Zandab explains the legend of Kharis and an anchor to Ragab as he brews the tama leaves, giving instructions on their use. The old sacristan of the monastery intrudes on their ritual, and is promptly executed by a risen Kharis. Meanwhile, in a breathtaking sequence, the mummy of Ananka rises from the swamp after being partially uncovered by a bulldozer during the excavation. She immerses herself in a pond and the mud is washed away, revealing an attractive young woman. Cajun Joe finds the girl wandering listlessly in the swamps, calling out the name of Kharis. He takes her to Tanti Berthi, the owner of the local pub, who aids the girl. Later, Kharis finds her there and murders Berthi, as Ananka flees into the night. Ananka is soon found lying unconscious beside the road by Halsey and Betty Walsh, the niece of Pat Walsh. While in their car, and although apparently suffering from amnesia, the girl displays an incredible knowledge of ancient Egypt. Her stay at Halsey's camp is again interrupted by the appearance of Kharis, and the kindly physician, Dr. Cooper, is killed. She again takes flight, and Halsey and the others go in search of her. Fleeing the monster after he attacks and kills Cajun Joe, she comes to Betty's tent seeking refuge. Certainly, Kharis can't be far behind. He enters the tent and whisks away his princess, leaving the horrified Betty unhurt. Betty asks Ragab for his help in finding Drive. Halsey, the treacherous disciple, has other ideas, and takes her to the monastery instead. Zandab, having already administered the Tanner fluid to the young Ananka, is angered to find Ragab making advances on Betty. He orders her death, but Ragab kills him instead. Halsey arrives, tracking them from the camp after finding Betty's tent destroyed. A struggle ensues between Ragab and Halsey, until Kharis intervenes. The creature, sensing Ragab's betrayal, advances on his former ally. Locking himself inside a cell-like room, Ragab is powerless to do anything but watch as Kharis literally brings down the walls on the two of them. Halsey, Betty and the rest find the mummified remains of Ananka in the adjoining room. Cast: Lon Chaney, Jr. as Kharis, the mummy. Peter Coe as Dr. Ilzor Zandab, Virginia Christine as Princess Ananka, Kay Harding as Betty Walsh, Dennis Moore as Dr. James Halsey, Martin Koslek as Ragab, Kurt Catch as Cajun Joe, Addison Richards as Pat Walsh, Holmes Herbert as Dr. Cooper, Charles Stevens as Achilles, William Farnham as Michael, Napoleon Simpson as Gooby. Themes: This film follows after the events at the end of final film where Ananka and Kari's pairs in the swamp. The original working title for this film, the fifth in Universal's Mummy series, was The Mummy's Return. Production. The Mummy's Curse made use of footage from two of Universal's previous Mummy films, The Mummy and The Mummy's Hand. Release. The Mummy's Curse was released to theaters on February 16, 1945. Home media reception. Critical response. The Mummy's Curse generally received moderate to poor reviews, with criticism aimed at the use of stock footage and the unexplained change of location in the story from New England to Louisiana. It holds a 44% fresh rating at the movie review site Rotten Tomatoes.